As I mentioned at the opening of the conference, I was joined on the steering committee for this conference by 3 incredible colleagues who helped to frame and plan the conference. On Wednesday morning, steering committee member Heather Woofter, professor and director of the College of Architecture and Graduate School of Architecture and Urban Design at Washington University in St. Louis, spoke about the conference theme and its relation to the context of St. Louis, where we originally had anticipated meeting. On Thursday morning, steering committee member Nicole Wiedemann, associate professor and director of the professional residency program at the University of Texas at Austin School of Architecture, spoke about the structure of the conference planning process and the double-blind peer-reviewed process that ACSA has adopted over the past 2 years in association with the conference's design and research peer-reviewed sessions. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce my 4th collaborator on the 109th Annual Meeting Steering Committee, Shannon Criss. Shannon is professor of architecture at the University of Kansas School of Architecture and Design. She'll revisit the conference theme and take us through ways it has been taken up throughout the conference. There you go, Shannon.
All right. Hello. It's good to be here. Thank you, Lynn. You know, for me, this 109th annual virtual meeting has been enlightening to see what's possible remotely. And personally, I've missed the meeting of you all at live coffee bars, catching up and sharing ideas. But I also can say that I'm thrilled to be able to go through the recorded sessions and listen in on simultaneous presentations. And, you know, that wasn't possible in the pre-COVID normal world. I'm looking forward to continuing to watch all of the presentations as I find time in the next couple of weeks. And as Lynn said, that will stay open and live until mid-April. Lynn, I want to thank you for spearheading this conference, and Mike Monty and Eric Ellis for keeping us all on track, particularly guiding our committee. Our committee, as Lynn talked about, was comprised of Nicole and Heather, Lynn, and myself. And I thought it was a most interesting process to work together remotely and to find collegiality in a new way as we responded to the radically changing world around us. Where I think, you know, when we got together, we attempted to get at the core of what's important in the face of COVID, protests, and the unveiling of inequities in our society. Within this context, we were able to imagine a conference that addresses the central question: what are the prospects for transformative architectural education, considering our evolving context and the emerging diversity of schools and communities? I think, you know, it's interesting that through our discussions, we developed 3 sub-themes, providing foundations for expanding our view of possible futures. 1, effective interdisciplinarity; 2nd, transformative scholarship; and 3rd, equitable diversity. For the first one, in addressing effective interdisciplinarity, historically, architects have tackled challenging and expansive problems in disciplinary isolation, employing a designer lens and borrowing ideas from other fields. Complex contemporary challenges in public health, social relations, and technology, to name a few, demand interdisciplinary teams that call for us to rethink how we work together to expand solutions. You know, how can we break down architecture disciplinary isolation to expand the prospects for transformative solutions? I think this week we saw some exemplary course developments in the areas of architecture, climate change, and society that for me illustrated how education in architecture and urbanism is well positioned to creatively and critically respond to climate change, and illustrated a range of interdisciplinary approaches that address environmental injustices. In the last couple of days, we saw innovative and effective super studios that are being made to include climate, landscape, architecture, and society-related scholarship that serves to connect students across campuses. This conference brought us together with the American Association of School Libraries, where this year has exposed that the pandemic has required all librarians, including those supporting schools of architecture, to quickly adapt to a different mindset and way of doing business, be it offering reference and instruction or selecting resources for collections. They have found expanded boundaries and new ways of doing things that find libraries can best provide support for teaching and learning where they can add value. We saw presentations given where unique contributions and skills the librarians need to have are being developed in the COVID environment and offer up possible futures. The second theme, the transformative scholarship, is one where, as a group characterized as makers and doers, architectural educators often push the boundaries of traditional academic scholarship. This impactful work can change places and it can change lives, but may not always receive appropriate acknowledgement. A central question emerged: can relationships between the environment and social practice help us connect globally through new models of community practice with local partners while also stressing the importance of place? An example that we heard here was the Divided City Initiative, which introduces activism as a possible means, where the partnership between urban design and humanities can deal with cities of segregation, working in interdisciplinary ways. The City Seminar was an initiative introduced and discussed where different disciplines are brought together to focus on the divided city and segregation. St. Louis has been the right space to discuss this topic with related contemporary violence as a result of police brutality. As a result of this tragic event, efforts to develop a deeper understanding have been created for faculty to foster interdisciplinary studios between urban studies and the humanities. New spatial contracts are being made where political rights are made through the making of citizen space. We learned about deep investigations into mapping the politics of spaces where we have to question how social contracts and public promises are kept and broken. We learned how some are using storytelling in design to engage complicated histories and how storytelling can be used as a tool to critique and understand place. Different methods of knowing place, narrative as is critical in the practice of design. Narratives can be very powerful tools that change dominant narratives and establish new approaches for the future. And finally, equitable diversity. We understand that diversity among the body of students and faculty on our campuses offers benefits for innovation through the infusion of distinct perspectives and ideas. Yet our programs must grow to be more broadly accessible and inviting. What changes are needed to welcome and support the diverse students and faculty whose ideas and perspectives are essential to solving our most vexing problems? Our opening session discussed how students come to universities with a range of abilities, many as first-generation college students, not knowing the same terminology and evidence of similar knowledge and experiential sets. These can be polarizing gaps, or as was suggested, these could be innovative moments of valuing diversified perspectives. Building on HBCU's core lessons, some through Booker T. Washington, learning by doing through the curriculum and into the community, has proven an insightful means of building on diversity. We heard how some are promoting new equitable means of valuing the perspectives of all in our classrooms and helping our students learn the skills and value of learning from others in the community. St. Louis provided a rich repository of environmental and social fabric that reveals celebrated architectural works and provided a rich ground for interdisciplinary, community-embedded practice, activist architectures that help us play out the themes of effective interdisciplinarity, transformative scholarship, and equitable diversity. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Reinhardt, Associate Dean of the College of Design at Georgia Tech and President of the Grand Chapter of Tau Sigma Delta, the only honor society nationally recognized in the United States for architecture and design students. I hope you've all been enjoying the annual meeting this year. And while we were not able to be in person again this year, I'm thankful to ACSA for providing the opportunity for us to continue to share our scholarship and connect virtually. I'd really like to thank the ACSA staff and leadership for all their work in making the annual meeting a success again. It takes an enormous amount of energy, effort, and collaboration to make the annual meeting a success, and that's even more so this year. So I hope that you'll take the time to thank them all as our conference closes. On behalf of Tau Sigma Delta, I'm also pleased to be continuing our collaboration with ACSA. The gold medal is the highest honor that we bestow, and it is especially meaningful for us that we're able to present the medal at the ACSA annual meeting. Before presenting the gold medal and introducing our speaker, I would like to take a few moments to tell you a little more about Tau Sigma Delta. Founded in 1913, the Honor Society has over 80 chapters in the United States, Canada, and abroad, including our newest chapter at the University of the District of Columbia. We're committed to supporting the work and scholarly achievements of architecture students worldwide. And to support these students, we must also recognize the work that our faculty do every day. Their role as educators, researchers, and mentors is invaluable, and the mark they leave on our students is critical. Having the opportunity to connect with faculty through our collaborations with ACSA is an important part of the work that we do. Tau Sigma Delta's mission is to recognize the intellectual achievements of our students, as well as honor the achievements of our practitioners. We have a focus on design excellence, service to the profession, and leadership. Tau Sigma Delta chapters engage in a range of activities, whether they be public lectures, service projects, or even student mentoring and tutoring. One of our signature activities is our awards program at both the chapter and the national level. With the bronze medal, school chapters recognize students who have distinguished themselves in design, as well as award the silver medal to practitioners who have made a meaningful impact at their school. The Grand Chapter annually recognizes leading practitioners with the gold and silver medals, and that is why I'm here today. Tau Sigma Delta is honored to recognize today's keynote speaker, Johnpaul Jones, with the Tau Sigma Delta Gold Medal and honorary membership in the Honor Society. Johnpaul Jones is a founding partner of the Seattle-based firm Jones & Jones Architects and Landscape Architects. Born in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, the capital of the Muscogee Nation, Jones is of Cherokee and Choctaw heritage. And it was through his time in Oklahoma that his maternal grandmother immersed him in the rich cultural heritage of his indigenous ancestors. These traditions have become the core of his design philosophy. No matter the project, Johnpaul and his partners embrace regional traditions to connect people to the land. Their work is fundamentally rooted in four worlds: the natural, the animal, the spiritual, and the human, tying them all together to remind us of our role in this larger interconnected world. The firm's projects include the gorilla habitat at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle, which earned the 1980 President's Award of Excellence from the American Society of Landscape Architects, the Sleeping Lady Mountain Retreat and Conference Center in Leavenworth, one of the AIA's top 10 green building projects of 2001, the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian, where Jones served as the lead design consultant, and the Vancouver Land Bridge, the most visible part of the larger Confluence project. Throughout his career, Johnpaul has worked with Native American communities on projects that honor them and their architectural and cultural heritage. His Native cultural centers include the Longhouse at Evergreen State College, which received a 1996 Award of Excellence from the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, as well as Longhouses at the University of Washington and the University of Oregon, his alma mater. He remains committed to diversity in the profession, working to help people from all ethnic, cultural, and economic situations find a place in architecture. He helped to create the AIA Seattle Diversity Roundtable and led diversity initiatives at the University of Oregon, the American Indian Council of Architects and Engineers, and the National Association of Indian Architects and Engineers. In 2003, Jones & Jones received the Firm Award from the American Society of Landscape Architects, and he was the recipient of the 2006 AIA Seattle Medal. In 2014, Johnpaul was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Obama, the first architect in the United States to receive the medal. He provides many lessons for us and our students. He is an activist. He embraces and honors the landscape, allowing it to guide his work. And he speaks of the collective intellect of his partners and clients, reminding us that the work of integrating the landscape and the built environment is a community endeavor. Through his work, he entwines nature, community, culture, and wildlife, demonstrating that each should be equally valued. Johnpaul embodies all that Tau Sigma Delta wants to recognize: design excellence, service, and leadership, and we cannot be more honored to present Johnpaul Jones with the Tau Sigma Delta Gold Medal. Due to our remote circumstances, he has had a sneak peek at the medal. Johnpaul, while I'm not able to hand you the medal today, I hope you've been able to coordinate a special medal ceremony with your friends and family. We really appreciate the work that you have done and will continue to do. And now I'd like to turn our session over to Johnpaul Jones, the 2021 Tau Sigma Delta Gold Medalist, for our keynote presentation today.
Thank you, Michelle, very much. That's quite an honor. My education, architectural education at University of Oregon for 5 years was fabulous and really made a big difference in my entire life. And so this is a great honor. So thank you very much. I'll get going here since we won't sometimes rabble on with words, but if the title of this is Indigenous Design, Building Native Values into Modern Design. And what I've done is I've divided the talk into 3 parts. Next slide. This one deals with ancient gifts built by indigenous native people who have lived here in North America a long, long time. So I'll touch on that a little bit because it's important in our architectural education. Next slide. Secondly is that there's a thing called verbal gifts. And that ties with ancient gifts, but it's not the physical thing, it's a verbal. It's what's passed down from indigenous elders from generation to generation to generation. And these are some Macaw, Northwest Native people men that I've worked with over the years. And I thought this really represented some fellows that had a lot of experience and passed a lot of good knowledge on. Next one. And then the last one would be what I call emerging gifts. Emerging gifts in the native architectural realm that go beyond what I call stereotypical design that sometimes takes place. So I'm going to talk about those 3 things pretty quickly. And but before I begin, could we go to the next slide? There's a couple of things that would be good for you, all the listeners, to remember about North American indigenous people. Okay, this is Billy Frank, who was a Central Coast Salish native guy here, and his family was very important in saving salmon and salmon habitats here in the Northwest. Go to the next slide. We're a diverse people, okay? People think all Native people are the same, but we're really a diverse, just like everybody else. We are not just Native people living in teepees, you know. We're active in restoring, saving, educating our country about the natural world habitats. Very active in that, all the way from Alaska, all the way through east and west down here in the lower 48. And we're not what you would see in movies. You know, and we all don't live on reservations. Next one. Next slide. Yeah. These are Santa Fe chilies. And can you go back to that one, the red one with the chilies? Yeah, I'll leave that on for a minute. You know, without our ancestors and our relatives in Americas, you would not have hot salsa, or corn chips, or tomatoes, or pumpkins for Halloween, or French fries to go with your Big Mac hamburger. So we're a diverse people that have done a lot of interesting things that kind of benefit the entire human world. Go to the next one. Secondly, we are still here. Okay, this picture represents something that my mother and grandmother had to go through. Even though the American government has tried repeatedly to eliminate us in many different ways, wars, relocation, training schools, etc. This represents a photo that their effort did some serious harm to the Native community by attempting to assimilate us into the community. And you can learn a lot about this. I'm not going to go into it too much, but there's a lot of information on it. Next slide. However, can you go to the next one then? There's a lady with red ochre all over her face. This is the next one. Oh, can you go back one more? That's it. It's an important slide to show. However, we're still here, and we still practice and teach what our ancestors passed on to us. Go to the next slide now with the kid. You can see where, this is a wonderful picture of a young girl being introduced to some very important ways and beliefs in her community. Go to the next one. So the American government wasn't successful in eliminating our indigenous ways and beliefs and practices. So that's the second part. We're still here. The third one, let's go to the next slide. We have some pretty unique ways and beliefs. And this University of British Columbia piece of sculpture at their anthropology museum is about ravens, clams, and humans. And if you ever get to learn anything about that in the Northwest, you'll find that everybody's working together. But it was the ravens that really helped us. And this is by a fellow that's passed away now, Bill Reed. Go to the next one. There are our uniques and ways and beliefs are expressed year-round, and it relates to the natural world a lot. And it's not what you see at native powwows around the country. This takes place on the Grand Canyon and they do a ceremony to help renew the world, and they do it every year. It's not something that's it's passed down from generation to generation. Go to the next one. And if you're ever in Washington, D.C., go to the Canadian Embassy, and on their outdoor courtyard right off the Pennsylvania Avenue, you'll see this piece of sculpture, and it's a canoe, and it's really interesting. It's filled with humans, nature, animals, and spirits, and it's a canoe. So this is a strong philosophical statement that's common throughout most Native people here in this country. And it's a really philosophical point of view that's very important. And again, that was done by Bill Reed. So let's go to the key parts of it. There's just some information for you to know a little bit about. And you can really find a lot of good resources and learn about that. So let's go to the next slide. Ancient gifts. So there I was when I was a young man out of college, working for the Macaw. And I was the only Indian student in school of architecture at University of Oregon back in the 60s. And one of the requirements was a 2-year course on the history of world and American architecture. During that 2-year course, we did not talk about the history of Indigenous architecture in America. We mainly studied great architecture of the world, which was good. I learned a lot. And however, it was an incomplete picture for me. So go to the next one. What I found after college is that there are some magnificent ancient structures and places all over America designed and built by America's ancient indigenous people. This is Canyon de Chelly, all of you know about it, but there's a lot more at Canyon de Chelly than this. This is just one area, and they're magnificent, and there's a lot of gifts and stories to learn from them. Go to the next one. Next slide. This is Pueblo Bonito and Chaco Canyon. That's what that was. And here's another one, which is just outside of St. Louis. People go, what? What do you mean outside of St. Louis? Just across the Mississippi River. It's called Cahokia. And it's a pretty phenomenal. Go to the next slide. There are great pyramids, and they were all located all through the Mississippi and Ohio River system, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to north into Wisconsin. And they're still there. They're hills with trees on them, but they're still there. And there's not much information taught about that in the architectural history courses, but it's a rich thing that could really contribute to a lot of different things that happened here in North America. Okay, go to the next one. That's Pueblo Bonito right down there, the low one. And anybody know where this is? This is in New Mexico, and it's Chaco Canyon. I think I always say to every school, you need to make a pilgrimage with your kids, with your students, if you can, to this location and look at this. This is a phenomenal thing. It's all oriented towards so many different solar equinoxes, things that it's a pretty phenomenal place. Go to the next one. What type of indigenous architecture are these native drummers singing in? Well, it's a Coast Salish longhouse, and they do this every winter. They have their winter ceremonies. So the longhouses are still here in the Pacific Northwest, and they're still used for all kinds of activities. Go to the next one. So all of these ancient structures are not haphazard. They were not primitive structures designed and built by savages. Go to the next one. They were all responsive to solar, seasonal orientations, solar events, and they were built with local materials, and they were the first green, sustainable architecture in North America. Okay, this is a fantastic one. This is in Florida, and it's still there. You can go and see it. It had to hold 200 people, sort of like our Senate and Congress. They all had to come together and solve problems. And so this building had to be, on a hot, humid day, had to be sort of like air conditioned, but in a natural way. Go to the next one. And there's a lot of these ancient indigenous structures all over North America, that have not even been uncovered, let alone restored. Go ahead, the next one. Believe me, there are thousands of these structures scattered all over America, and they are all loaded with ancient gifts. This is one of the Hopi Mesa community that's still in existence, and there's a hell of a lot of lessons to be learned from this. So next one. So this is a northern style longhouse, probably a ceremonial house. They had different houses for living, ceremony, and for other kinds of things. And I love their beauty. I love their spirit and all the structures across North America. So go to the next one. This is the second one, which is verbal gifts. This is really kind of the important thing because this was passed down as Indian people, as indigenous native people of America. Our ancestors have been here a long, long time. And through them, our elders have a deep understanding of the American environment. There is no place in America without a native story. And let me tell you, I've worked with Native people all over the country, and they have fabulous stories for every habitat in America. Go to the next one. Our elders knew every habitat, every plant, every animal. They knew the land, the dirt, and the rocks. They knew the water. They knew the sky and the clouds and the wind and the spirit of every living place. And these verbal stories that they have to share are the most important to listen to as designers, as people, other humans that have to kind of deal with the difficult things that are going on with our earth right now. They came through, these stories often come through songs and storytelling, poems, dances, and ceremonies. And they're stories from experience. And they can help us with planning and design. Go to the next one. My Choctaw mother and grandmother and aunts gave me this kind of knowledge. And as an American Indian planner and architect, I try to use these gifts that they gave me. I try to stand with these verbal gifts, and I try to stand with them and what they gave me, and not somewhere else in my work as a designer. Go to the next one. When I talked about Native people being very diverse, there's, just like in any human community, there's a lot of diversity of opinions and things. And this was the gift that my folks gave me that is very helpful in the diversity, getting people talking about any subject, and I get them talking into these four worlds, and it's amazing what comes out of that. And so let's go to the next one. I'll show you some close-ups so you can read it better. The natural world, it's not just plants, and seasons. It's a lot more than that. It has to do with equinox and solstices and the power and clouds and rain and earth. It's a pretty phenomenal area to deal with and discuss. And go to the next one. The next one is the animal world, and it's just full of good information about healing and ceremonies and connections and messages and just all kinds of important things, because we have to share our world. We get to share that with the animals, other animals. Go to the next one. The spirit world, which is the third one, has to do with creation and renewal and visioning, but it has to do with fire and smoke and cleansing and healing and the many worlds that we deal with, and birth and death and wellness. And I said round places too. Go to the next one. The next one is our human world. And it has to do with passing on the transfer of knowledge. As designers, we need to create places where this can take place, not just in auditoriums and classrooms, but it needs to take place in outside, inside, circulation ways, everything. So it's really important to think about those kind of important things. And welcoming is another one. And so that's the four worlds that we try to use. Go to the next one. So every indigenous community in America have verbal gifts to share. And we need to listen in our planning and design efforts with them. I love this statement by Billy Frank. He says, "I don't believe in magic. I believe in the sun and the stars and the water and the tides and floods and owls and hawks and flying and river running and wild wind talking, and their measurements. They tell us how healthy things are and how healthy we are, because we and they are the same." So doing designs that connect you to the natural world, the animal world, the spirit world around you is really, really important. Go to the next one. So the last one is going to be I'll show you some projects that I've worked on over the years that are just kind of worth looking at. They're emerging gifts. These are projects that try to go beyond the stereotypical planning and design for Native people. Our elders ask us, this is really important, our elders ask us to respect their cultural ways and beliefs, okay? But they do not expect us to stand still. And, we're not building pyramids and we're not building Chaco Canyon things, but to move forward. Okay, so here let's look at some projects. They'll go from giant projects to small projects. So, okay, next slide. I was very fortunate to be involved in this project from the very beginning all the way to turning the keys over and the ceremonies that took place after it was built. And it took a lot of Native people working hard together. And I'll tell you one little quick story. There was a big gatherings of advisors, and we before we even started, and we went through tons of things. And then one afternoon on a cold day, we went over to the site, and there was a busload of people, and we walked around on the site. And we were standing there talking, and I saw these 4 elders go over to a spot after a while, and they dug a little hole and threw these feathered darts in there and closed them up. and put dirt back on top of it. So I went over and said, well, what's going on? And they said, well, Johnpaul, you don't need to know why we did this. You just need to know that this is the center of this site and you should use it wisely. So I got out my tablet and I marked down references to trees and buildings all around, and I went back to the studio with the staff and I said, okay, take that site plan and just see what are the geometry lines and everything, and what are they focused on? Where's the center of? So everybody did that with their computers, and what happened? That centered right on the same spot that those native elders said, this is the center of the site. And so if you go into that building and you go into the big dome Potomac space, you'll see 4 pieces of red stone, and that's the center of the site. That's the Potomac place. So go to the next slide. I had to listen to their verbal things they told me. You know, Washington, D.C. is full of a lot of wonderful things, but it's not like where Native people come from. You know, trees are all lined up in nice lines on the mall in Washington, D.C. And go to the next slide. And the architecture's, this is a wonderful building for Jefferson, but it's Greek and Roman. So the Greeks and Romans are everywhere in town. So how do you do a design that respects that and doesn't conflict with it, but at the same time, you know, gives honor to being a wonderful place? And so here's the next one is a program that was put together by, next slide, was put together by the Venturi's office way back when they were trying to figure out what to do. And it was a great thing. It says the way of the people. And there were 4 key things right after. They were like poems that are the 4 key things to remember as a designer in doing this building. And I'm not going to go into those right now, but after that, it was all the technical stuff about how many of this and how many of that and where there should be and that they needed. So, but it was those 4 key important phrases in the beginning that really stuck with me and my team throughout the project. So next one. One of the key things is that there were 500 plus diverse Native communities in North America, and there was actually more than that, but that's what is out there right now. And so there's a great diversity. How do you do a design that will attract and feel like it's related to each of these people? And one of the early stories, there was a Native woman that got up, and she was from up north in Alaska, and she said, when I go to the completed building, I better see some of my culture there. I better see some of my culture. So, I mean, you know, that just scared me to no end right there. How do you do that? Go to the next one. So that's where those 4 worlds came in handy. And so there was a lot of things, such as you see the native blankets, and there was braided sweetgrass, and there was all kinds of things that were part of the discussion and putting these models together about different things. And it was one of the working sessions there, so that we could reach out and speak with the building design, site design, to the diverse Native community. Next one. Douglas Cardinal, you know, he had a lot of influence on this design, and you can see by looking at the curves. But if you could find a straight line in there, you know, I'll give you a 6-pack of beer. But it's hard to find a straight line in this building, yet it's all structurally laid out in a grid. And so, but I just wanted you to see that. Next one. This is the Potomac space where everybody comes in from the right here, and then they go down a ramp to get into the Potomac space. And it was talking to some of the Native folks. They said, well, when we enter our ceremonial buildings or sweat lodges, we always go clockwise. And then we talked to another group, and they said, well, when we always in our buildings, we go counterclockwise. And so, you know, so we had to make both work for this place. And so, and then the other one is the Smithsonian said, well, we can't afford curved stone. And so it was a matter of, okay, how can you design with all these radiuses and curves with straight pieces of stone? And I'll give you a clue about that later on. Go to the next one. And this is the Potomac space, and see that red dot? That thing's about 6 feet across, but that's the center spot that the elders identified in that thing. And there's a whole bunch going on here. There's some colors on the wall and that sort of stuff, and that is some crystals that were really important to a lot of different tribes in the country. And we got them mounted on the south wall, and when in the equinoxes and the solstices and in the summer and winter, fall, all that, those colored prisms light up various ways, and some are on the floor, and part of the season they're on the wall, and part of the season, but they just come alive for a week during those important ceremony times. Go to the next one. And this is you know, I tested this with my own drumming and singing, and it's got a good sound to it. And this is one of the Midwest drum and singing groups singing, and it fills the whole space. People come up from all levels and look down. So go to the next one. I'm going to try to move along here a little faster. This is a picture of the stone. We found this stone in South Minnesota, and what's interesting is that what we figured out to be able to do, you know, 80% of all the curves in the building on the exterior and on the floor, if we take and use 4 sizes horizontally and 4 sizes vertically, we could just about do every curve with straight pieces of stone. And it was a pretty well good discovery for us, because then we saved a lot of money for the Smithsonian. So next one. There was a wetlands. This was all 20 feet down was the original grade, and it was a wetland. So a lot of Native people have a lot to say about wetlands and how important they are into our habitat and life. And so we thought we ought to restore and bring back some of that wetlands, and that's on the east side near the main entry. And then there's a great view of it. So go to the next one. So we didn't want Congress to forget us. So on the east end of the building, there's a big East Plaza, and you know, there's the Capitol in the background. And so this was a Native group that was singing. They have a lot of events out there of singing. And one of my senators here in the state of Washington said, we hear sometimes in Congress's meeting, we hear this Native singing. And we realize it's coming from over there at your museum that you designed. And he said, did you do that deliberately? And I said, no, that was just an accident that happened. But we did do it deliberately. The eastern part of our building, the east face of it, goes way up and creates an arch and focuses the sound out towards the Capitol. So we don't want to be forever forgotten. One more story. Go to the next slide. These 2 people on the right, my wife and I are on the left there, but these 2 people helped us. We asked the Smithsonian, we said, what do you serve in your cafeterias? They call them cafes in those days. That is Native American, and they were really quiet because they run all of them. And they said, well, we serve a thing called Navajo pizza, and that's it. And they said, almost everybody wants hot dogs and hamburgers. And so, a long story, these two Native people helped us create an all Native menu for their cafe, and it's the most successful food service in the whole mall in Washington, D.C. In fact, it makes more money than all the rest of them combined. And it's not expensive. If you ever go there, there's 5 regions of food, and there's a children's menu for every region. So the food thing is really important. Okay, now I'm going to show you, go to the next one. That was dealing with a large, diverse Native community across the country. And I'll go a little faster on this one. This is a particular project that we did for the Southern Ute tribe in southern Colorado. Next slide. they were horse people. They were very good, excellent horse people. And this is an older picture. Go to the next slide. And they adopted the teepee from the Plains Indians and really got very efficient at building, magnificent teepees. And go to the next one. They still carry on their ceremonies. Every year they do these dances, and it's the bear dance, and that's where young members of the tribe get to meet each other and are encouraged to kind of gather together. And go to the next one. During the course, go to the next slide. During the course of designing this, they gave us something, and they said it was a Ute philosophical approach to circle of life. Okay, this is. They said, we want you to design something to fit this. So it was phenomenal to be given something like that, because you could really work with it. And so we worked with the little kids, and they were terrific. They knew a lot of things and gave us a lot of kind of great ideas about how to do the design. Next slide. And then we worked with the young adults and high school kids, and they were just loaded with all kinds of advice about landscape and building design and all that. And so it's amazing how much you get from those kinds of things. Go to the next one. But most of it came from these elders. There's 3 of them standing up right there. The rest of the people are project managers for the Southern Utes. But they were intimately involved in what we were doing. They were just intimately involved, had lots of great stories and suggestions. So let's go to the next slide. So we got inspired about the teepee, the modern teepee, which is basically you go inside it during the daytime and it's just full of light, and then you walk around on the outside at night and the light filters through. And so that was a key thing we kind of really worked with. And then let's go to the next one. And this is, you can see, this is a kind of at the end of design development. It's a technical drawing of that big welcome space that people start with. So go to the next one. I'll go through these fairly fast. The darker rust color purple area on the upper part is the museum part, and the yellowish area is their cultural center. And in the center of the blue area is the welcome space. That they wanted a space. They said we always start, even though it's an outdoor space, we always start with welcoming people there, and then we move into our structures. So that this was all lined up to the cardinal directions and the equinox and the solstices, and it was a wonderful thing to kind of be able to deal with that, just like we did in Washington, D.C., but for a specific tribe that had 3 branches of its tribe. So let's go to the next one. Here's a model just to give you an idea of what it kind of, next one. That's a model. Let's go to the next one. It's in the days when we built models. Yeah, that's good right there. That's a good one to look at. That's the interior of that welcome space. And I won't go into all the details about it, but there's those clusters of poles in the center to hold up the tall cone-shaped space was really important in their philosophical beliefs. Go to the next one. Above is one of their 4 colors that were very important to them, and it was difficult to find the glass color that was reasonable, and we did find it. Next one. Okay, so this is a picture of it starting at night, and it's a pretty successful building, and they really use it a lot and use it to represent their culture. And they have casinos and community buildings and all that, but this one they feel really represents them. So I want to show you one more that's underway right now, under construction in California, and just outside of Santa Barbara, east of Santa Barbara. Go to the next one. And there's only a couple of slides of it, but it's the Chumash tribe, and they everybody told us, oh, they never did architecture. They did small little structures that were maybe 10 feet tall and 10 feet wide, and they were kind of honeycomb shaped. And So when we were talking to an anthropologist in the area, he said, "Oh no, they did architecture. They did structures that were 50 feet in diameter and over 50 feet tall. And there were some were ceremonies, some were for living in, and some of that." So we thought that was a key thing to start here for the design of this. So when the visitors come, that's the first thing they step into is their architecture. And then they go through a kind of a black box interpretive thing, and then their educational classroom is on the right-hand side there, and that's another dome space. So anyway, that was a design that where you could really take something that had been lost and bring it forward, and how important it is in the telling of their next slide, their way about their ways and beliefs. And it's pretty interesting here. It's a little further along than this picture shows, but you can see the two round spaces, and they face west. And very important that they face west. So go to the next one. And this is another Southern California tribe in Palm Springs, and we did the design through design development, and then their local architect took it from there and created the drawings. It's under construction for the Agua Caliente tribe. And what I wanted to point out is that they have stories about, see those palm trees that go through the middle of it? Very important in their culture to have those palm trees in the water that they're, and so that was important to organize the design around. Next one. I won't spend much time with this because it's under construction right now too. So go to the next one. That design is all related to their baskets and the way they weave and their relationship to the solar system. And they don't have a circle of life, they have a spiral circle of life. It's pretty interesting, a lot of diversity. Next slide. This is, I got just a couple slides of this. This is an interesting place. This is Fort Vancouver on the Columbia River, just north of Portland, Oregon. That's Vancouver, Washington, just there in the Columbia River. And this was an important place, native place at one time, where tribes came up the river, up from the south, over from the north, and over from eastern Washington and the Klickitat Trail. And they ended up here, and this was a trading place. And so then the Hudson Bay Company located here because that's where the Indians were trading, and they were there for a long time. And eventually it turned into an army fort. And then there was a Transcontinental Railroad. You can see up on a dike there, that's a straight line on the left. And then there was 4-lane highways and interchanges going through. And they lost the connection to the water. And whenever a lot of native people through wars and stuff passed away here at this fort, and so every year they do a ceremony there to honor those people. And go to the next slide. And they don't have any way to get over those impediments. And so this was a bridge. We labeled it the land bridge, and we worked with 5 different tribes in the area, and it has a lot of things that talks about their story, about the land and the water, and it's very successful. Now there's lots of condos along the water, and people jog and bike over, and there's ceremonies that take place where people come with ceremonial canoes and come up to the shore. They can now come over and walk right into the fort rather than having to take a 4-mile walk around. So next one. We've tried to build language in everywhere, bring in the language, because that's an important thing to all people, and especially Native people. So you can see where we land was one, there's another in water, and the various tribes have their own word that represents probably sometimes a paragraph in definition, but it's, a lot of times it's just one word. So, okay, 2 more slides, one more, go ahead. I want to get this done in here in a couple of minutes. Way back when years ago, I decided that I was not very good at housing and native housing, and there was a lot of difficulty with the Bureau of Indian Affairs doing these kind of tract houses and shoving Native people into it, and they just all fell apart. And so, but I got brought in on this project here in downtown Seattle to help what's called the Chief Seattle Club with their homeless housing, and they got some funding from the state and city, And this is an 8-story building that's providing housing for these homeless folks that are mainly the ones that are just coming out of this and have some kind of structure to the life, and the counsel and help them. But we had to infuse this thing with a lot of Native ways and beliefs that and it had to appeal to the diverse Native community here in the Northwest. And it's under construction. They just now topped it out this week, and so I won't say too much about it, but it's mainly for adults. They're doing other housing for families in other locations. So anyway, I wanted to let you know about that. And the next one is a little small project that, look at these murals. These murals are 24 feet by 24 feet, painted by a Native artist at a kind of a rundown Indian City of Seattle school district rundown school. And they used it for a Native school for many, many years. And this artist, the Native artist, got together with the students and helped paint these murals. There's 4 giant ones and then 4 other ones. And we got asked to help save them and work with the architects that were going to build the new schools. And we did. Everybody worked together. It was really phenomenal. Go to the next one. Next slide. And you can see the big 4 ones were put on the edge of the gymnasium, and the rest of them were located around on the site. So it was this area was an ancient place that the Duwamish and Suquamish people in this area went up into an area near this and did sulfur baths. And so it has a long history here. And anyway, these were kind of wonderful things to spend a little bit of time, a lot of donated time to help restore and repair. So next slide. What I found, it's really about identity. It's related to tying to the environment and the habitat and the land, but it's also about identity. This is a wonderful beach wash piece of cedar that washed up on the beach near me years ago. And go to the next one. What I plan to do is be deeply invested in the reawakening of Indigenous planning and design and environmental activism. Next one. And I invite you, all your educators out there, to stand inside our Indigenous ways and beliefs and learn a little something about it, and not somewhere else. That's really important, not somewhere else. Next slide. Thank you. That's it. Questions?
Thank you, Johnpaul. What you can't hear is the clapping from everyone in the audience, but I'm sure they appreciate the stories that you've told just as much as I do. We do have some time for Q&A, so I want to make sure that everybody adds questions in the Q&A. Shannon had commented in the chat that the stories that you're sharing about making the buildings were really wonderful, and those stories are as much about the people that you're building for as the work itself. And it seems as if your work is coming from you approach every project with the idea of respect, right? So can you talk a little bit more about, you described some of the working with children and how you really kind of learn more about their own work and their own stories. Can you share something with us that you learned that you didn't expect in that process?
Yeah. First of all, bring a lot of food. They like to kind of snack while they work. But what we found is that we bring some things to build with. It's clay, sticks, rocks, just simple stuff that we've gathered around in where they live in their community, and kids like to build things, and you can ask them like, well, what does a longhouse look like, and you get these interesting constructions And you can have a discussion about that and about plants with them and the environment and water and all that. It's pretty interesting to hear their kind of innocent way of saying things. But what I found we use it most of is that we say, well, take this home to your parents and come to the family night tonight and bring your parents with you. and then we tell them that we're going to provide the food for them. And so that way we get the young parents and the kids together out, and they see what their kids are doing, and then they just kind of open up and start talking about what they like. And some of them are very, they're not being sacred and they're not being spiritual. They're just being honest about their heritage and what they're talking about. So that's one reason why we like to do that. I do another thing too. We just did it up in Alaska with an isolated village. Sometimes I have to separate the men from the women. Okay, we bring them back together and start them together. But the reason being is because a lot of Native communities, the women are let the men go forward. And you know, if it was a warrior, traditionally a warrior society, the men are really tough about things, but they have a lot to share. But then the women, when we get together with them, they bring out all of these wonderful stories. So that's a way you gather really good information, and we do that in non-Native gatherings too now, and it really does help that way. Sometimes, like one up in Alaska, one lady sang a baby lullaby, and emotionally it affected us so much that you know, it got worked into the design, and I won't tell you how, but it really did get worked into the design. So
we have a few questions in the Q&A. The first one is asking about your perceptions on the current state of education in both architecture and landscape architecture.
Well, you know, I don't teach a lot. I just a little bit whenever an opportunity. I'm in the field working, you know, and one of the things that I was very fortunate at the University of Oregon that back in the mid-'60s is that there was you had to take a year of landscape architecture, a year of interior design, and a year of city planning. And then if you could get invited, if the professor liked you, to the second year of city planning, which only was 7 or 8 people. So and there was the art school there, right, in the same facility. So it was this great diverse of, you know, creative things going on, and I really feel like, wow, that was a unique experience to go through that. And sometimes I think we get too specialized in our schools and what we're teaching, and we've got to do that. We got to help, you know, with the students, because that's what it's like out in practice. But I think some of that was good. I had to take, you know, we had to take a year of construction drawing class, and you know, 2 years of structures and all the other stuff. And then one of the other thing was you had to take 2 years of the history of architecture. And so, like I said, they never talked anything about the indigenous architecture in this country. So when my partners and I set up a scholarship at Oregon, and we did it at University of Washington, I brought out the check and said, well, here it is, to set up the scholarship for your faculty, but you have to start teaching about indigenous architecture in this country. You have to just make it part of the whole program. And they do that. And it's really great, because every year now, one of the professors bring that into life some way by gone to South America and worked in villages and talks about this stuff. So it's really important, that broad education. I just, you know, so.
I do think sometimes we do get a little narrow. Shaheen Ribari has a longer question, but first he says that your work and your presentations are so deeply inspiring, and he can't thank you enough. Words can't convey how he's feeling. And then he says that many of us are fumbling through thinking and talking about decolonization and design. at times appropriating an inspiring expression of self-determination, or at times taming a wild concept, we use decolonization as a metaphor, imperative, or specific movement to reclaim land. Would you mind sharing your thoughts on the ways we think about and practice decolonization through design?
I wouldn't have, I grew up with a term that wasn't used very much that relates to this, and the young Native professionals that I work with in the community here in Seattle that are non-architects, they want to indigenize things. And I go, what? If I would have used a word like that, I would have been run out of the community, you know. So, but now I know what they mean. You know, they really mean what they're saying. You know, they want projects to have more native, indigenous feel to them than you know, just kind of good pieces of architecture. So, I think that's one. The other one is, you know, when I was working on the Smithsonian project for 12 years, it took us 12 years to get that all built and done. There was a radical Native groups that came to a lot of the presentations and stuff, and especially in Minneapolis area. And they were so insistent, you have to talk about the massacres and the deaths and you know, all the things that are really terrible, absolutely terrible. You have to talk about that and show that. And so, and they really harassed us about the design and the planning and what the Smithsonian was doing. And so I finally said, look, when I compare that, it's very important. The best for them to do that is through their exhibits and storytelling. Okay, they can do it better than through the architectural art. And that only represents, I'm going to move my hands up here, that only represents about of 12 inches of things that you can talk about that are important in indigenous communities. That it represents about an inch or inch and a half. And the rest of it, 10.5 inches, is full of things that we really need to talk about that could be helpful to all humans in solving problems that we have in our cities, in our planet, in our all communities and all that. And those are the important things that those 4 worlds that I showed get people talking about. And so I don't spend a lot of time dealing with colonial, you know, things. I think everybody, that needs to be told, just like that school, that picture of that school, those schools, people need to know about that. That was really created some really difficulties, even in my family back in Oklahoma. And so I think it's important, but it only represents, doesn't even represent, it's that other 80% of things that are really need to be shared and are constructive. That doesn't mean everybody will listen to them, but it's really enough people will be listening to it that might make a difference in voting, you know, and all that stuff that goes with a kind of a healthy environment.
Thank you. So you talked a lot about your college experience, and before we started the presentation today, you said it was a really transformative experience. And in some ways, there are the diverse backgrounds that came together and how that helped inform you. But what are the other ways in which that experience transformed you that we can remind our students of, that college is a time for that type of experience?
One of the things in the 60s, there wasn't any support in colleges overall for diversity, helping the students of diverse backgrounds to be successful. There just wasn't. And so one of the things that you mentioned, the projects I've done, Evergreen, University of Oregon, Oregon State, University of Washington, and a couple other universities, I thought it's really important to provide a place where the Native students can gather, get counseling, share food, and they're from a diverse background, and so they represent 0.001% one of the number of students on a campus in a lot of places. And so, some way we've got to help make them successful. And I was just lucky. I had some really wonderful professors, one from Spain and one from Switzerland, and then a couple other ones from this country that just sort of took me in. They saw something in me and they took me under their wing and really helped me through a lot of different things. So I think those things are really important. Somehow, universities not just set aside a room in the student union, but create a place where Native people students can gather and to help make them successful in their education. I think that's really important. The one at University of Oregon that we did is a small building. It's about 5,000, little less than 5,000 square feet. And they have a hard time scheduling it for the Native students to use because the Black community, the Hispanic community, the Japanese community, the Asian community, everybody likes to go in the building because it's full of longhouse logs and space and shapes, and they just love the spirit of it. So you know, that's what I'm saying. That's the important thing that I learned in school. How I got through it, I have no. It was just luck. I think it was after I got out of school and joined my partners here that who were both trained in architecture and landscape architecture that really kind of got things working together, and that helped quite a bit. But I value what happened at University of Oregon. I got exposed to you know, fabulous thinkers that came in, and I remember one, Ian McCard came to give a talk, and the students blocked the door and wouldn't let him leave to go catch his plane. They wanted him to talk more, and I was just stunned by that it was a kind of a new thing that opened up. So it's that kind of thing that happened, that joining, and how important the nature world and landscape and architecture really, you know, are together instead of a castle on the hill, you know, sort of thing. So.
We have another question from Liz. The role of architecture in preserving cultural identity could be said to have taken a back seat in not only education, but also in practice. Can you expand upon the architect's responsibility to share their knowledge and bring gifts from others in order to stress the importance of having, and I can't see the rest of it, Liz? I'm losing the rest of the sentence, but can you talk about what the architect's responsibility is here?
Well, again, it's a project story. Oregon State University, the president of the university said, well, we have to provide some facilities on the campus for 4 of the diverse groups, Native, Pacific, Asian, Hispanic, and Black community, and they had housed them in old houses around the edge of the campus, and so they weren't in the middle of the campus. They were always on the edge somewhere, and they were just old houses that they used the best they could. They had a library and a counseling space and study space and a place where they could do a little food. And the president said, well, we need to hire somebody to kind of help us plan to do 4 of these and locate them somewhere in the campus so it's near the teaching areas and all that. And so we got hired to do that. And what was interesting to me was that how do you know, I didn't know what to do on the Native one and the Asian Pacific because I've lived out in the Asian Pacific area, but I didn't quite know what to do with the Hispanic community one and what to do with the Black community. So one of my new partners here at Jones is from Mexico, and he helped do that. And then we teamed up with a Black architect here in Seattle, and it was interesting. I'll just say a little bit about the Black community. He brought forward. They had the university had a program developed where they all needed each group needed a big gathering space, and they needed a counseling space, and they needed a study space, and needed a food prep area. So, and they weren't too big. And But what he brought, what the Black architect brought to the table was that, well, here's what I grew up with in the Northwest and what I knew of the South of Black architecture, not from Africa, but from this country. So he brought these, they were narrow, some long, narrow spaces. They were, some were important to be kind of in a round. So he brought those kind of geometric things to us to work with, and we worked together with the students then and came up with something that they felt really represented them. And then they gave us all kinds of ideas about patterns, material patterns, floor patterns, wall patterns, things that we could add to the project to kind of give it more identity. So, and that's kind of the best thing you can do, is to do a little research, work with your whoever your client is, and then get some people that have had some experience at some of this architecture. So
great. We have a few more questions. Julian Bonder wanted to say and comment that your talk was so moving and profound, and thanks you. I'm going to combine part of this question with our end question, but he has a student, a Native American student, who's currently working on a thesis at Pine Ridge Reservation. And so one of her precedent studies was your Southern Youth Center. And he's specifically asking if you have any potential suggestions as to how to approach such work in relation to community healing and culture.
Yeah, use those 4 worlds. Okay, use those 4 worlds. That's really important to get, people will talk in those areas, and from that things will come out. And it doesn't have to be in any kind of a linear thing. You just use those 4 worlds for discussion purposes, because that brings about, you know, their feeling about the environment, their feeling about each other, the feeling about the community, the injustices that they've, and you know, just everything comes out, and about how they feel that they can best get their message across, you know, and so those 4 worlds I found are absolutely fabulous to work with. And I thank my aunts and my grandmother and my mother for passing that on to me. It was honestly, it was a hell of a gift. So use that. Learn to use that.
Thank you. Well, yeah. You've been sharing your gifts with us this afternoon, and one of the things that Julian and others have commented about is the way that we can share those gifts with our students, right? And the stories that you've shared, I think, help to kind of place and contextualize the work that you do in a very special way. And if you were to give us homework as professors and how we might be do a better job at instilling in students the importance of storytelling, what would you suggest that we do?
Well, I did a course at the University of Oregon. I was given the Pietro Berlusti Distinguished Scholar for a term there at University of Oregon, and what I did is I gave. I said we're going to do a project with in one of these topics, a native project on one of the topics, and I gave them 10 topics, all the way from healthcare to, daycare to museums, just it goes on and on. And so, and I said, you have to choose one of those topics, okay? And the first half of the class, I said, close your computers. I don't want to see you use those computers in any way, or I'll flunk you in this class. I wouldn't flunk them, but I was threatening them to put those things away. And so let's talk about them, each thing that you want to do. Let's do research, and then I'm going to take you to some places in Oregon that I think you will just experience, that things that might influence you on that. And so we did that, and about halfway through the class, the students were looking at their other students in other classes, and that they were already drawing and on their computers, and they were printing out things, and they were really worried. And I said, don't worry, we'll catch them and we'll go right past them, because you're building your mind up with all this information, and it'll just flow out of you. And it did. it just flew out of them, and they got, I mean, every one of them, I think there was about 18 or 20 of them, they all produced some of the really wonderful things. And they learned a lesson about that, that spend some time learning about, you know, the land and the place, the people, the, you know, just everything that you possibly can, and about the living things. And, you know, one place I took them to, they was a traditional smokehouse, a really big one, at the Grand Maroon Reservation in Oregon. And they walked in, and the place was full of smoke, and they had built a fire down low, and they had to come into that space. Then the kind of, the smoke cleared out, but they had to have that smell, and they had to feel that. And then the first thing, the group that was there was about 4 of them, they sang songs to them, and then somebody talked a little bit, and then they did some other things. And it was that I saw that emotional experience really helped them be able to pull something together like that. And we went to a healthcare facility where, I mean, there was a lot of Native people in bad shape, and they learned a lot about that too. So, you know, to me, it's the learning and seeing and experiencing the emotional things, such as, you know, what I just told you, and the beauty of the place and all of that. It's just all that then can really help pull together your thoughts about how to design something quickly. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Helping our students slow down, I think, is part of the battle that we all have, so that they can really experience the world around them. Johnpaul, I want to thank you so much. This was a great talk. We really enjoyed hearing your stories and wanting to share that with our students. And it was an honor to present you with the gold medal tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
That was an incredible talk by an architect I've long admired. Johnpaul, thank you for speaking to us today and sharing your wisdom, opening our eyes to the Indigenous history and processes, to the gifts you inherited and have now shared with us, and to the influences on your work as a designer. And thank you to Tau Sigma Delta for partnering with ACSA, for honoring Johnpaul Jones with the Tau Sigma Delta Gold Medal, and recognizing his lifetime of achievement in our profession. And finally, I want to once again thank my collaborators for the 109th Annual Meeting Steering Committee and Review Committee, the ACSA staff who have worked tirelessly for months and behind the scenes for the past 3 days to make this event happen. Eric Ellis, Danielle Dent, Kendall Nicholson, Amanda Gann, Carol Manx, Michelle Sturgis, Edwin Hernandez, and Allison Smith. I must also convey my heartfelt thanks to ACSA Executive Director Mike Monty, who has guided the organization through the past 12 months and kept it and us healthy. Mike always makes everything look easy, even when the challenges are formidable. Last but not least, a special thanks to all the plenary speakers and all of you participants for making this another historic annual meeting. Thanks, and we'll see you all hopefully in not too many more months.